Welcome back to the Hotel Orloff. It's June 26, 2023. It's a Monday evening here in the Hotel Orloff here in historic Gatlinburg. Come visit us. But right now we're talking about Gold Key and Dell Comics. Staples in the comic book world for several generations. But pretty much gone now, though Gold Key's supposed to be coming back in a few months. I was going through alphabetically, and I'd gotten all the way up to the letter B, Buck Rogers. And I was showing you, if you watched the last episode from this morning, that Gold Key had a Buck Rogers comic in 1964 that was more or less faithful to the old comic strip. And then Gold Key, in the last days of Gold Key, got the license to do the Buck Rogers TV show. And this is from October of 1979. See, Star Wars hit in 77, and then this TV producer, Glenn Larson, said, I want to do a Star Wars kind of TV show, and I'll hire I'll hire John Dykstra, the guy that did the special effects, won a special effects Academy Award for Star Wars. I'll hire him to do the special effects for my TV show. And I'll hire Ralph McQuarrie, the guy that did the pre-production art for Star Wars, that designed the look of the movie. And I'll get those people and I'll have a big hit. And except it didn't quite capture the feeling of Star Wars so much. And they got a guy that smokes cigars. It's supposed to be kind of like Han Solo, but I don't know. It just didn't really cap. It just ultimately disappointed, and it only lasted a season or two. And then Glenn Larson thought, well, there's still money to be made with this space opera thing, and he did a Buck Rogers TV show. And this is, I think, where I left off last episode. I just showed you that one. This is the very end of Gold Keys. The company was going out about this time. This is one of its last licenses it got from the movie and TV world. Buck Rogers. This one's from October of 81. And so you can tell there, right underneath the Whitman logo, see, it says 1 and 10. That means 81 October. When comics cost 50 cents. Gold Key didn't last much longer after this. In fact, this may be during the time period when Gold Key weren't even sold on newsstands. They all of them have the Whitman imprint, which meant that it was sold in a 3-pack of comics, and that's the only way you could buy these later period Gold Key comics, because by then, by the early 80s, a bigger proportion of the comic book market was being sold through comic book stores, directly distributed to comic book stores, non-returnable, and unfortunately the comic book spinner racks of my youth were disappearing. Real shame. Okay, Dell, Bugs Bunny. I've seen a lot of Bugs Bunnies in the last few days because big giant horde of Dell comics was just purchased by our friend Kevin at Gotham City Comics in Mesa, Arizona, and I'm refreshing my memory what Bugs Bunny comics I own. This is also from the 10-cent era, Dell. Sometimes Dell would put out these giant comics, giant, real thick comics. This is Bugs Bunny's Vacation Funnies. They'd put out summer ones, and they'd put out Christmas ones, and sometimes Halloween ones. Oh, speaking of, here's Bugs Bunny Halloween Fun. But see, this is Gold Key. See, I was telling you last episode, Dell was a publisher of books, and they started doing comics in 1929. reprinting comics from the newspapers, and the first, what most people consider the first real comic book, was in 1933, and it was done by Dell. It's called New Funnies, wasn't it? I think so. And anyway, in the late 30s, I think around 1938, Dell decided, hey, they will pay for it. We'll finance these comics and we'll distribute them. We want someone else just to produce the comics. So they got this company called Western to work with them, and they would provide the comic material. Dell would pay for it, and they would distribute the books. But Western decided, and Whitman and Western are kind of the same thing. In '62, I think Gold Key said, hey, we're doing all the work. They're just distributing, which is work, but so we can do that. Anyway, Gold Key split away from Dell and took a lot of the properties that they were doing, the Disney, the Warner Brothers characters, and then they created some of their own characters as well, like Dr. Solar and Magnus, Robot Fighter, and Turok, son of Roger Stone. I like that. I think Graphic Man should create a cover for Turok and put Roger Stone there looking over his son as he's killing dinosaurs. Anyway, beautiful painted cover. Gold Key was famous for its beautiful painted covers. Famous with me, at least. The heck? Oh, here's another great Bugs Bunny. Look at this one. See, it has 80 pages. They'd sell it for a quarter. That was a lot of money then. This is something a parent would buy their kid when they're about to go on a road trip across, we're going to go see the Grand Canyon. It's going to take us 12 hours to get there, or 2 days to get there. You'd buy some thick comics like this because back then you didn't have a cell phone or a tablet to throw in front of the kid. They'd actually have to read a book or do something. The world before video games. Here's a 15-cent Bugs Bunny, which means it's from the late 60s or very beginning of the 70s. And of course it's got a purple cover, which purple covers are beautiful, but it's hard for me to read the number. Oh, I've got some reading glasses here. Black ink on purple background, it's hard to read. And I don't think this is going to help. Oh, 107. 107. Was a guy we listened to on the internet called Juan 07. Anyway. But we're not supposed to talk about that. 1 means 71, and 7 means September, right? Yeah. September. No. July. What am I thinking? September is 9. This would be July of 71, which means this was on the stand in May of 71. Ladies and gentlemen, this beautiful Bugs Bunny. Yes, indeed. This is, what we're seeing is probably reprints of comics from the 50s. It's my suspicion, but I don't know. I'm not an expert. But you didn't know that when you were a kid. You just thought it was new comics. Oh, this is the first Bugs Bunny comic I ever bought as a kid. Bugs Bunny 140. I know that because it's got 140 there in VHS letters on top of the My Light bag. I think we saw this same cover, but the 1950s version when this was printed the first time. Back when it was a Dell comic. So all that Dell stuff would show up in the Gold Key comics later because I guess they owned it. They were producing the material. It was just Dell was just distributing, paying for it, distributing for them. So let me see when I bought my first Bugs Bunny comic. I think that's a 2. That would make sense. 201. Okay, so that would be 1972 January, which would make it really November of... That's... what? November of 71. Yeah, so... 71... November of 71. Oh, I was in kindergarten when I got this. So this is the condition a comic book that I owned since kindergarten is in. So you can see I was better than the average kid with my comics as far as not trashing them. So this has significance to me. You know, it's a childhood copy. It's yeah. I think when the phone died or the memory went out in the last episode, I was talking about that Buck Rogers show, about how they tried to keep it going. In the second or third season, they brought on this Hawk the Slayer or something. He's a guy with like feathers, and they thought we bring in this tough guy, maybe it'll bring up our ratings, and I don't think it worked, although people say that was the weakest season. It seems like they were pretty good, but I remember they had a couple of comic book conventions at the Forum 303 Mall in Arlington, Texas, and I remember seeing that guy sitting there forlornly on a bench in front of the Montgomery Ward. I was in the bookstore there where and I'm looking out at this guy and saying, that's the Hawk guy from Buck Rogers. And he was just sitting there like, what am I doing with my life? I'm at this little mall in Arlington, Texas, and no one knows who the heck I am. Here to, it's like, and as he did, I don't know who that guy was or what's happened to him since. Maybe he's become a great actor since then, but anyway, I need to look up that guy, what his name was. But I saw him. Yeah, I didn't go talk to him or anything or ask for his autograph, but it's like, that's the Hawk guy, man. Yes, indeed. Sorry, I'm looking at these old comics. Yeah. So, how are you doing on this wonderful Monday evening? Okay, doing great, huh? Here's a 30-cent Bugs Bunny that came in one of those Whitman 3-packs. They've covered up the part of the numbers there. So I don't know exactly what some of the 30-cent era. This is from about 1976. These aren't in order, man. This is a 15-cent one. But I can immediately tell that's 1950s art that they reprinted. Dang it. What does that say there? I'm going to have to... Man, I can't make it out. It's 15 cents. It's from the it's probably from 1970, 71, something like that. Who cares? All right. This brings us to Calvin and the Colonel. Now, there was a very popular old radio show called Amos and Andy. And it was also a television series, but Amos and Andy was it was a sitcom on the old radio about, and I think it was a taxi cab company. I'm trying to remember, but there were these two guys named Amos and Andy, and they were African American, except on the radio they were actually played by two white guys. And so when they made it into a TV series in the 50s, they had, in fact, they had to hire new people to play the characters on TV because obviously you couldn't bring on two guys that weren't African American. People would notice it. On radio, maybe people don't notice that. So, anyway, the two guys that did Amos and Andy, I'm trying to remember, was it Freeman Gosden and Charles Carell? I think that's their names. I could be wrong. They couldn't do their Amos and Andy routine. But in the early 60s, they started a Saturday morning cartoon called Calvin and the Colonel. And it was basically Amos and Andy, except now they're a bear and, what the heck is that, a fox possibly? But it was just, they were doing the Amos and Andy radio show, but it was now animated. And it was a cool show. Anyway, this is what's going on here. Oh, he's burning his hat. It's kind of, you don't often see in a comic book the character reading like a girly magazine. And it looks like it's a dog that's on the cover, like a Marilyn Monroe. Looks like Marilyn Monroe's a dog. Yeah, or is it a bear? No, that looks more like a dog. But, I don't know. I guess in this cartoon world, a bear looks at pinup pictures of dogs in bikinis. But they called these kind of comics, Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, they call it funny animal because they're animals that do funny things. Although I saw a picture of an old comic store the other day from the early 70s, and some comic store owner thought they must have been one of those the comic store owners that had a little bit of a sense of humor, how some of those guys are. And he had the funny animal section labeled anthropomorphic because that's the word for talking animals that wear clothes and all that. And I guess he thought I'll be witty and Anyway, here's another Dell from the Corbin collection. Not Richard Corbin, but whoever this Corbin kid is. I've got a lot of his comics. It's the Captain and the Kids, one of those old comic strips that was old when dinosaurs still walked the earth. And these were I first became aware of the Captain and the Kids, and I think it was originally called the Katzenjammer Kids, and then it became Captain and the Kids, or maybe it was Captain and the Kids became Katzenjammer Kids. They were two German kids, and they talked with heavy German accents where maybe they don't in this. They were written with heavy German accents in the comic strip. And then when Harvey Kurtzman did a parody of the Katzenjammer Kids in the early Mad comic, he made their accents so insanely ridiculous that you reading the comic, you really can't even understand what they're saying. I remember that. But anyway, this is one of those comic strips that goes way back. Anyway, how about that? It's Dell. It's in mint 9.2 condition. Here's one of those titles that Captain Venture in the Land Beneath the Sea. It's not based on a TV show or a movie. This is some original creation that Gold Key came up with. But look at that beautiful painted cover. Gold Key and Dell before Gold Key came along did tons of adaptations of TV shows like Cheyenne. And this is the Dell pledged appearance, which is this is 10 cents. So this is going to be the 50s, and Dell and Gold Key never put the code of authority up here that showed that the comic book had been looked at by a panel of people, and they made sure there was nothing bad in the comic, because they say, why should we submit our comics? We never had anything bad in them to begin with. This is the show with Clint Walker. This is 1957. It says Cheyenne number 772. There were never 772 issues of Cheyenne, but there were 772 issues of a comic called Four Color. And this is in terrible condition. Someone put pencil marks over, some little kid. And this is the way most comics are from back then. They're the pages aren't white, and a lot of times the covers, they're turning brown like that. So those comics that Gotham City Comics just got last weekend, they were all perfectly white, like that little girl lived somewhere where in her comics were not ever put in an attic or a garage. They were perfectly preserved, those comics that I was looking at. We were all looking at the other day. If you've been watching my last few episodes, you can see all of those comics that I saw. Okay, so that's Cheyenne. My original childhood copy, who knows what happened to it, but this is the sacred comic, one I got later, of the very first comic I ever bought. Was bought for me. I don't know. The very first comic I ever owned was Choo Choo Charlie. Now, Choo Choo Charlie was on the TV commercials for Good and Plenty candy. I've never eaten Good and Plenty candy. Maybe it's wonderful. Is it like M&M's? Something like that. I don't know. I'm sure they still make it. But he was the advertising spokesman. It would be like if you had a Tony the Tiger comic, but they never mentioned Frosted Flakes in the comic. This was an advertising spokesperson. Or if they had a Frito Bandito comic or something. Anyway, this is the comic, man, that started it all. Started all the sickness of comic collecting. But, so, I have a few copies of it that I got because, first of all, I loved trains as a little kid. A lot of little boys love trains. Because my older brother was always fiddling around with his... Well, he had HO trains, but then he started buying N-scale trains, which are little bitty ones. HO are more kind of that, big train cars, and then the N-scale are the little bitty ones. And I thought that was fascinating, and my brother was always reading Model Railroader, and I liked to look at those magazines. So trains became fascinating to me. Here's one I got at Duncanville Books. It says $18 there. The red sticker, I think, meant that it was half price. But I had to get it because this is just important. Now, the white covers are hard to keep clean with little kids with grubby hands. But this looks really nice, and so I was happy to get that. Historic to me, probably most people wouldn't care about a Choo Choo Charlie comic, but it's important to me. Todd Rundgren's song's going through my head, Hello, it's me. When he goes, it's important to me, something like that, doesn't he? Here's another comic from that Corbin collection. War Stories, Combat, Saipan, Stepping Stone into the Heart of Japan. Okay, so this is a... man, it's 7. Okay, Dell did the same thing. The little numbers work on Dell too. Gold Key pulled away from Dell, but Dell kept publishing comics. So then there were two companies. Dell split into two companies, Dell and Gold Key. Most of the good stuff went over to Gold Key. Most of the artists went over to Gold Key. But Dell kept publishing comics, but they kind of were more like this with drawn covers. Nothing wrong with this cover, but the Gold Key had the painted covers. Dell tended to just have covers more like this, line art. Dell did have some licenses, like I think they had, didn't they have Mission Impossible? And they had, I don't remember. I don't think they didn't have as many as Gold Key. And Dell, there weren't as many Dell comics on the racks. And then by the early 70s, Dell died out. But Gold Key kept going for another 10 years. I'm just thinking about World War II and how horrifying that was, and the fact that those guys came back from World War II, and those guys that say you were 22, 23, you come back after World War II. Let's see if we find... This is about 22 years later. So you're about 45 years old, still relatively young, and your kids are buying this comic. Or, I don't know, man. I mean, I guess you feel, I mean, the World War II veterans were treated nicely when they came back, much more nicely than the public treated the Vietnam War veterans. Unfortunately, they weren't treated very nicely, but there was a lot of, that was pretty heavy stuff to see your kids reading comics, and you go over and then it's like your kids are playing with toy machine guns, and oh well. Here's another Dell. Dell got these. Oh, this is. It says second printing on it. I never noticed that. Look at that. This was a popular comic. See, here's a Dell painted cover, and this is after the split up with Gold Key. So Dell got. From Universal Studios, they got the rights to do comics based on the Universal monsters. So this is the creature from the Black Lagoon. And they also did Frankenstein, and I have the Frankenstein one. Did they do Dracula? I think they did. Anyway, this was during the 60s when the monsters were like almost as big as the Beatles, you know, and every kid had model kits of the monsters, and so that's why this comic went into a second printing. This was a big seller creature. But there was just one comic of each. They didn't do a series of them. Okay. This is early 12-cent Daffy Duck from Gold Key. And 1963, August of 63, not long before the Kennedy assassination. Did you see those pictures of Robert Kennedy Jr.? There's some pictures of him without a shirt on. This guy looks like Hercules, man. I like that guy. They won't even let him debate. What's his face? I kept wanting to say Obama. Biden. They're scared of him because he knows what's really going on. They say, oh, he's just full of misinformation. Don't listen to him. He thinks his uncle was killed by our own government. That's ridiculous. We know it was Oswald, the lone shooter. Yeah. This is what you find a lot of these old books kind of looking like this, but we were seeing some really nice ones the other day. Oh, look at this beautiful ad on the back. Anyway, I don't know. That guy is, he looks like he could take on Putin, because Putin's always been like a kind of a man's man, and our presidents, what was the last president we had that actually, when was the last time we had a president that was just like, that looked like a superhero as far as their physique? I can't think of one. Yeah, mainly because most of the presidents have been so old. Let's see, Carter, Nixon, LBJ, Kennedy. Maybe Kennedy was the last president, John F. Kennedy was the last president that really was young and vigorous, movie star looking president. Then before that, you had Eisenhower was a general, but he was an older guy. Maybe I'm I'm going back through history. I can't think of another president that was like, that looked like Steve Reeves. Seriously, it's like this. You got to look it up, man. But they won't let you see it because they don't want you to vote for him. But I think I think that Trump and Kennedy should team up, maybe form a new party, and because the Republicans and the Democrats are both out of their minds. They should form a new party, the Republicrats or something, and have a Trump Kennedy ticket. Could you imagine having a Trump Kennedy sign in your yard? Daffy Duck and the Roadrunner. This is a childhood copy. Boy, that's a funny gag on the cover. Usually the jokes aren't very funny. You got to think, okay, what's funny about that? Oh, he has longer legs. They never make you laugh. I did see a few. Some of them are funny when Donald Duck's nephews are like shooting BBs like right at his eyes, or the ones that are like, it's like, I can't believe they put that stuff out in a comic. It's like, the more violent they are, the more funny they are. But anyway, here's Daffy Duck in Snowman's Land. What's the joke here? Beware of the abominable snowman. Oh, and it's right behind him. So that's funny. I like the font there on Daffy Duck. Okay, now we're getting into an original character from Gold Key. This is a Whitman variant. Dagar. Do you pronounce it Dagar or Dagger? I've always pronounced it Dagar, but you know, when have I ever talked about Dagar with another human being? Never. Except, you know, maybe on the Four Color Fossils show, older guys my age talk about this comic, maybe. And then it's like, you've always called it Dagger, I've always called it Dagar. Tales of Sword and Sorcery. So Conan started selling really well at Marvel, and then every other company started to come up with their own Conan. So this is their Conan. Dagar the Invincible. 25-cent era. I can't give you the... Well, yeah, I can. It's not bagged. I can just open it up. And it's from 1974. What month? This is number... Damn, my eyes are getting bad. Or is it the lighting? 1974. This comic had better art, different style art than you see in most Gold Key comics. I don't know the artist's name, but I am thinking it looks like an artist from the Philippines, is my guess. Is it Rudy Nebris or something like that? I don't know. You'll tell me in the comments down below, I'm sure. Some of you smarty pants will tell me. But yeah, so the artwork is good inside. Remember this ad? This artwork looks like it was drawn by a second grader. Dagar. There's another copy of Dagar. This one's from October of 1975. Gold Key. Okay, we're coming up to what I'm really wanting to see. Here's Fess Parker and Daniel Boone. Now, Fess Parker played Davy Crockett in a series of, 4 TV movies in the early to mid 50s. Disney put them out, right? They were on television, but it became a huge phenomenon. The Davy Crockett movies were so popular, they even, I think, played them in movie theaters, and the Davy Crockett theme became just played everywhere, and every kid was wearing a coonskin cap just like Davy Crockett. He was played by Fess Parker. But in the last episode, you know, he gets killed at the Alamo, so you can't keep going with the Davy Crockett story. So later, 10 years later, in the 60s, ABC, or I forget what network, wanted to, like, maybe we could do a Davy Crockett TV show. And they said, well, we'll get Fess Parker, but why don't we make it Daniel Boone? That's another guy from history that also wore a coonskin cap. And he was kind of like Davy Crockett, except he was in history back maybe about 50 years before Davy Crockett. Like, Davy Crockett knew about Daniel Boone, and he and his guys may have been imitating Daniel Boone with the coonskin cap. So anyway, they had a TV show with Fess Parker playing Daniel Boone, and it was on through the 60s. That had a really cool theme song, I thought. And Ed Ames, who was in the Ames Brothers, which is the type music your dad always listened to, the Ames Brothers. They were okay, but they had him play. As far as I know, he didn't have any Native American blood, but they had him play his Indian assistant, and that was the Daniel Boone show. Oh, this one doesn't have a back cover. Looks like it might be missing more than just the back cover. It looks like it's missing the back cover and maybe about 3 pages. Anyway, this is a trashed copy, but it presents well. No, it doesn't. Okay, wonderful. Daniel Boone. But we're getting up to... Now, there was also a Davy Crockett comic. We're getting close to that, because now we're at Dark Shadows. Now, my first exposure to Dark Shadows was through this comic book and through a Viewmaster reel. I love monsters, I love vampires, so this comic book appealed to me, but I never saw the soap opera. I think before we moved to Germany in 1969, I was 4 years old. I think maybe my mom watched that soap opera. I know she watched General Hospital. I remember hearing the General Hospital theme, and every day I'd go out and greet the mailman. I have some memories of that house in San Antonio on the base. But another memory I have of that house is seeing my older brother fall completely from the top of the stairs to the bottom of the stairs because we were in a rush to go somewhere. That was an unpleasant memory. Another unpleasant memory of the late 60s when I was like 3 or 4 is that there was a local San Antonio TV station that was going to run cartoons all night. And I was like, why? They're cartoons. They're meant for me. I'm a kid. Why can't I stay up all night and watch the cartoons? Anyway, I was just noticing the time. So I had to pick my wife up. I may have to cut this short. It's like, that's not fair. Of course, now cartoons are on 24 hours a day on the Cartoon Network. Back then, you only saw cartoons on Saturday morning. A little bit of cartoons when you got home from school, Popeye and Friends, maybe right before you went to school. Of course, school wasn't even a factor for me in 1969. Being 4, I wasn't in school yet. Maybe I was 3. This probably was 68. Could have been 67. It could have been one of my first memories of and there were no VCRs where you could just record anything. That was the thing before VCRs. A horror movie, this monster movie, you've read about it in Famous Monsters and Monster Times, and it comes on at 3 in the morning or at midnight, and your mom's not going to let you stay up and watch it. But then later there were VCRs, and I thought, why couldn't they have just invented VCRs 10 years before? And then actually they had them, but only rich people like Elvis had them. But if I would have had a VCR, I could have watched those monster movies and all that stuff. My mom wouldn't let me stay up to see Saturday Night Live either. That stunk when it first started and was really good for a few years because even though it was a school night, it was not a school night. She didn't want me getting out of the rhythm of when I fell asleep and when I woke up. This is another copy of that same issue of Dark Shadows from February of 1971. I think the show was canceled in 72. Started in 66. I think it was about to die, and it was a gothic soap opera, and they had a ghost, I think, in the first season. Well, they didn't have seasons. I don't know why they released them on DVD. They call them seasons. Soap operas never have seasons. They just keep going forever. But in the second year, they brought in Barnabas Collins. That's when it became a huge hit. They brought in a vampire, and then they later brought in a werewolf. And they had time travel, and they went to hell, and they had like a Frankenstein. They had a Lovecraft kind of story. It was insane. It was wonderful. But I never saw it till later when it was syndicated. I just knew it from the comics because when I lived in Germany, they didn't run the American soap operas. There was one station from the Ramstein Air Force Base or something that had American shows in English, but it was whatever shows they picked out. They had Addams Family, they had reruns of Star Trek, they had Partridge Family, but they didn't show Dark Shadows. This is the first one I got as a kid, though. This cover, I didn't know the TV show, but the cover grabbed me, and it's cool to be able to look at the cover and tell the exact month I got it. It's June of 72. So that would be the 71-72 school year. So that's after summer after kindergarten, before I went into first grade. No, it's the summer after first grade, because second grade was started in September of 72, and third grade started in September of 73. School used to start in September back then. School always started the day after Labor Day, back in the old days, but that is no longer the case. Now most schools start earlier because it gives them more time to get ready for the big state test. Every school and every state has some big test the kids have to get ready for at the end of the year. Bush Jr. made that a law that every state had to have some kind of test just to see how much they're learning. These covers were magnificent on the Dark Shadows comics. I love this cover. But you see, you'd go from this painted cover, right, to this kind of art, and that was what was always jarring about Gold Key, is just the difference in art quality. Oh, they never had any scenes that were outdoors in a city in Dark Shadows. But anyway, Dark Shadows was a fun show. This is another one I got as a kid. This one was trashed when I bought it. I remember hating it, but it was like the only Dark Shadows comic on the newsstand, and I hadn't seen one, and I bought it anyway, even though it was like, yeah, all this damage was that's the way it was messed up already on the spinner rack. I remember this, and it had the fold. I remember it, and it's in the 20-cent era. I was okay. 02 February. I mean, that's February 74. So I was in third grade, and I remember this would have come out around Christmas time of my third grade year, and I just was so disappointed. I bought it, but it was like, oh, it's in terrible shape. I didn't like that at all. Because, kids could be, just because you got buy it fresh off the rack, it could have already been trashed on the rack. This is from April of 74. Another beautiful cover. I didn't like that last cover where it looks like Nancy Pelosi. I thought the girl was so ugly. I mean, this part's cool, but I guess she's supposed to be ugly, but she looks like a Joe Biden voter, and that's what everybody on TikTok looks like that. And this is August of 75, and this is disappointing because they don't have a painted cover. It's gotta watch the time. I gotta go pick up my wife. Here's a Whitman variant, and there's so they got Quentin Collins, who's the guy, the other heartthrob. Now, Barnabas Collins, played by Jonathan Frid, he was on the cover of all the Tiger Beat teen magazines because a lot of girls had a crush on him because he was this tormented guy, even though he was in his 40s, I think, when he was playing Barnabas Collins, and wasn't really a conventionally good-looking guy. It's just that he was just so dreamy because he was so tormented. But then when they brought in Quentin Collins, who's this guy that had these Wolverine, Glenn Danzig chop sideburns, and he was the guy that turned into the werewolf, right? And he had his own theme song, Quentin's theme, you know. And so when he came along, there was a legitimate heartthrob. There were two characters that women could dream about and write their fan fiction about. Deputy Dog was always one of the great cartoons from Terry Toons. It was hilarious. It was genuinely funny. Deputy Dog was before my time. You know, I was born in 65, and I think the cartoons were made in the early 60s, maybe about 64. But I'll tell you, what would happen is if you woke up early, and let's say this network cartoons start at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning. If you get up right when the national anthem, you know, plays, and before the network cartoon starts, sometimes they play some older cartoons. The local station would. Sometimes they'd have Sunrise Semester, like a biblical show, and then they'd have Gone Fishing, and it'd be two guys in a fishing boat fishing or something, the Farm Report. But then they would have an older cartoon like Deputy Dog or the Go-Go Gophers or Underdog, and those were so much better than when the network started. Those cartoons were neutered in the early 70s, but these old ones were great. Deputy Dog was wonderful. Terry Toons pretty consistently throughout the whole history of Terry Toons were wonderful cartoons. Of course, that's the Mighty Mouse Company and everything. Heckle and Jekyll. This is another Deputy Dog. I think this comic is actually called New Terry Toons, but I have it filed under D for Deputy Dog. I wish I had more Deputy Dog comics, but this is Dinky Duck Hashimoto-san. Hashimoto-san was a Japanese stereotype mouse. The other day, my wife was talking to someone on the phone, and they were talking about a disease called Hashimoto, and I said, that's a little mouse in the old Terry Toons cartoons. I think this mouse might have been named after a disease. I don't know. It's like, it just sounded good because it's a Japanese word, but I think it's like a disease. Am I wrong or right? Look it up, tell me. Okay, here's a Dell book, a little bit older. Still 10 cents. Yeah, this is probably right before the split up between Dell and Gold Key. This is an adaptation of the movie Dinosaurus. The movie did not look as cool as this painting makes it look, but, you know, it was a movie with dinosaurs, and I'm sure this comic sold 1 million copies. Another thing that's really cool is that font. That's a great font. Oh, one of the greatest shows. You can see it on YouTube. Right as soon as this ends, which will probably be in a few seconds, go look up Diver Dan. It was a puppet show. See, it was this guy, Diver Dan was a real guy, and there was a mermaid that was a real mermaid, but it was filmed not really underwater. They faked the underwater look, but there were these puppets that were on wires that would interact with Diver Dan. And see, that one is, I think, a German with a monocle, that fish. But there was some gangster fish. See, look at that fish that always had a cigarette. He's always smoking underwater. It's funny as heck. It's black and white, so if you're an idiot, you might not like it because I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean. Some people say, I don't want to watch that. It's black and white. It's old. Just deal with it. That's the most ignorant attitude ever. Some of the greatest stuff on television and movies are black and white. You just gotta deal with it. I wish I had more Diver Dan comics. This was Dell 15 cent. Well, I guess Dell was, but this is not from the 15 cent era. This is not from the late 60s. This is older. I think what happened is, that's what happened. I think when comics went from 10 cents to 12 cents in 1961, Dell went up to 15 cents for a couple of months, then dropped back down to 12 cents. I think that because Diver Dan's very definitely Kennedy era TV show. Oh, and this just happened one time. Gold Key put out a Doc Savage comic, and I think that's a James Bama painting, just like from the paperback covers. And so they tried to do a Doc Savage. They tried doing some of these older heroes, Doc Savage, and I think right about the time they did that the Buck Rogers, the one that wasn't based on the TV show. But they tried. The Gold Key did some great stuff. Doc Savage. Their own original character was Dr. Solar. Beautiful painted covers. I think here's another copy of it. And see, they have the back cover had the whole painting until I think around 67 they would do that. See, this is the back cover. I have a lot of Dr. Solars. I'm going to have to go get my wife here in a minute. I might take you with me. Then we got to get dinner. See, here the back cover is an ad. So this is from... I can't figure it out, man. This is December of 1965. They don't have the back cover. But I just saw a book earlier from 1967 that did have the paint. So okay. I think for the most part they stopped putting... Maybe it just depended on whether someone paid for an ad on the back cover that month. This one's from January of 65. Look at that, man. But it has the painted cover. So I can't really tell you definitively. This one's... Gosh darn, where'd those glasses go? This is from September. What? Oh, this is September of 1966. Look, he's fighting the devil. And it doesn't have... Maybe that was just an anomaly. I could have sworn I saw a 1967 comic earlier that had the painting on the back. April of 67. Beautiful. How could any kid not buy that comic? I've got 2 copies of that. Maybe I'll finish the Dr. Solars, then I'll go get my wife. These covers are so great. And I still haven't finished the short box, and this is the second episode. This is an earlier issue. This is from June of 63. So the beginning of the... This is probably about 6-7 months before the Kennedy assassination. Just beautiful cover. Beautiful. And I'm sure there's a painting of that on the back cover. And I still think that one of us needs to start making posters of the back covers, and so we can have our own gallery of this wonderful Gold Key art. Another fantastic cover. I got a lot of Dr. Solars. They don't seem to be in order. Maybe someday I'll get them in order. This looks like an older one. Okay, we're about to move into Dr. Spectre, which is one of the characters Don Glut created. Oh, it's May of 65. Don Glut, spelled G-L-U-T. I used to think it was pronounced Glut, but I don't know, it's Glut, I think. Don Glut was a big fan. He made, I think, probably the first live-action Spider-Man movie. He did it. You look it up. Type in Spider-Man Don Glut or first live-action. He made a homemade Spider-Man movie in color. It was 16 millimeter, I think, back in the 60s. And he has a stop-motion Captain Action Spider-Man, and then, you know, real people playing Spider-Man, and Mary Jane, and some villain he created. But anyway, I think he created Dr. Spectre, and some other characters. This is an original character, Dr. Spectre, another original character Gold Key had. Heck, I better go. But I'll get back to these books tomorrow. He created Dr. Spectre, and what else? And then he later wrote for. I think did he work for Marvel? He worked for. Oh, and he worked for Warren magazines too, and now he's one of the only writers that's still around that now works for Warrant. Shudder and Vampiress Carmilla, those are made to look like old Warren magazines, and he writes for them. I think he's actually their editor, or the guy that proofreads each magazine before it comes out. And he's a friend of mine on Facebook, and he's always talking about, I just proofread the new issue, it looks great. So he's one of the great fans from the old days, that Roy Thomas generation, the people that were fans and then got into doing the real stuff. Okay, sunglasses. Doing these shows does a number on my eyes, staring into that ring light. Not good. Okay, let me turn this light off. All right, so all right. So how's your Monday, guys? You doing great? Yeah, I think I'll get over there just in time to pick up my wife. See a little bit of downtown Gatlinburg here in Alaska. Yeah, I had a nice talk earlier with Gary Von Davis, who is also known as Bone Daddy or something like that. I know him as Gary Von Davis. He's a regular viewer of the Hotel Orloff show, and he's been on several times recently. I think he was on 2 episodes ago. He's got an amazing pad in Colorado, unbelievable collection. And nice talking to him. Okay, I was talking to him when I dropped my wife off, and now I'm picking my wife up. Okay, let's see what's going on in the world. Okay, fantastic.
Thursday night, partly cloudy with a slight chance of showers and thunderstorms until midnight. Then mostly cloudy with a chance of showers and thunderstorms after midnight. Lows in the upper 60s. Chance of rain 50%. Friday, partly sunny with a chance of showers. A slight chance of thunderstorms in the morning, then a chance of thunderstorms in the afternoon. Highs in the upper 80s. Chance of rain 50%. Friday night.
That we don't spiral it into 3 rough at bats in a night. Generally, they're just up there and they're raking. They're taking walks when they need to take walks, but they're ready to attack when it's time to attack. And they've been attacking running the bases too. They're leading in.
Oh yeah, buddy. if you want to move here and hang out with Groucho Orloff.
This is Sierra, and you're listening to 91.9 KSOI, Murray, Iowa.
This radio station, they get little kids to do the little station IDs. It's kind of cool. And we got cool music like this on the radio also. Yes, indeed. Well, be seeing you.